Alright, let's see. What can we do over here? Alright, what do we do over here? What do we do, Lamaisa? What daf are we even on? Oh, alright. Let's see, where are we? Alrighty. Alright, where are we? Okay, here we are. Alright, sounds good to me. Alrighty. Great. Alright, Alright, that sounds good to me. Alright, very good. Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf. So you see, I wrote here Daf 23, but what I meant to write is Daf 24. Today we're learning Daf Chaf Daled Masechta Yoma. Today's Daf, at the beginning, we kind of wrap up the machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish that we saw at the end of the day yesterday regarding is Trumas Hadeshen considered one of the avodas of the Kohanim in the Beis Hamikdash or not. And then really the focus of today's daf is going to be a machlokas between Rav and Levi about what are the avodas that a zar is chayav misa, a non-kohein would be chayav misa if he does them. That is what we're going to be learning about today. Chevra, let me know when you're ready, and we'll get started. Alrighty. So, the Gemara says about 10 lines from the bottom, Nema Ketanoi. Let's say it's like a machlokas tanoim, that this machlokas between Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, that Rish Lakish says that Trumas Hadeshen would not be considered an avoda, and Rabbi Yochanan who says that Trumas Hadeshen would be considered an avoda. Let's say that it's machlokas tanoim. Okay, what's that machlokas? Al Basaro. Now this is machlokas that we have seen. We have seen this earlier. Soras Hashas says on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, so 11 days ago, that the pasuk says Al Basaro Matamaloma Yilbash. Now what does the pasuk say? V'lavash hakohen midovad u'michnesei bad Yilbash Al Basaro. So the question is, how come it has to say Yilbash a second time if it already says V'lavash at the beginning of the pasuk? Why not just say V'lavash hakohen midovad u'michnesei bad Al Basaro? Why Yilbash? What do we learn from that extra word? So Matamaloma Yilbash lahavi mitznefetz va'avnid la'arama divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says, you know what we learn out from Yilbash? What we learn out is that even though the pasuk only specifies the ksones and the mitznefes, yes, which is ksones, and michnasayim. So even though the pasuk only mentions michnasayim and the ksones, nonetheless, when you do Trumas Hadeshen, and that pasuk, of course, is in the context of Trumas Hadeshen, so Rabbi Yehuda says, well, you shouldn't think that by Trumas Hadeshen the kohen only needs to be wearing the michnasayim and the ksones. So therefore it says Yilbash to teach that in addition to the michnasayim and the ksones, he also needs to wear the avned and the what's the other thing that we're missing? The belt. What's the belt? The avned. The mitznefes and the avned. Wow, I feel like I was forgetting my kohen vestments vocabulary there. So that is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, the reason why the pasuk says Yilbash, even though it already said V'lavash, is to teach us that by Trumas Hadeshen, the kohen wears in addition to the ksones and the michnasayim, he also wears the mitznefes ve'avnei. Reb Dosa Omer says, Reb Dosa, what do we learn out from Yilbash? L'rabos big day kohen gadol b'yom kippurim sheksherin the kohen hedget. We saw this the other day to teach us that the 4 garments that the kohen gadol wears on Yom Kippur when he goes lifnai v'lifnim into the kodesh hakodashim, he wears the 4 garments as opposed to, the 4 garments of a regular kohen as opposed to the 8 garments that he normally wears. So says Reb Dosa that those 4 garments can be used the rest of the year by other kohanim. Rebbe shtei tshuvas bedavar, and like we saw the other day, Rebbe responds to Reb Dosa and he says, I have 2 questions on you, Reb Dosa. Number 1, chadad avneto shel kohen gadol lo zeu avneto shel kohen hedget. Question number 1 is that the belt that the kohen gadol wears on Yom Kippur when he's wearing the 4 garments is different than the belt that a kohen hedget wears the rest of the days of the year. Or every day of the year, really. Because according to Rebbe, the belt of a kohen hedget is made out of kilayim just like the belt of the kohen gadol. meaning the belt of the Kohen Gadol in general, and the belt of the Kohen Hedget in general, are the same. They're both made out of kilayim. However, on Yom Kippur, when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Kodesh HaKodashim, he wears only cotton. And therefore, the belt that the Kohen Gadol wears on Yom Kippur, when he goes into the Kodesh HaKodashim, is different than the belt normally worn by a Kohen Hedget. So therefore, Rebbe says, I don't see, Reb Dosa, how you can say that a Kohen Hedget can wear the garments that the Kohen Gadol wore into the Kodesh HaKodashim. They're different garments. I mean, 3 out of 4 are the same, but 25%, one of them is not. Okay, so that's question number 1. Ve'od, and question number 2, begadim shenishtamish bohen kedusha chamur tishtamish bohen kedusha kala. These begadim that the Kohen Gadol wore into the Kodesh HaKodashim, which is pretty high level stuff. So you're not just going to use that on a regular day of the year for also certainly very holy things, but not quite the avod of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Okay, fine, Rebbe. So then what do you learn out from Yilbash? L'rabos is ashchakim, to teach that you're allowed to use even the garments that are worn out. They can't be ripped, but if they're worn out, if they're not brand new, that's fine. You could still use those garments. We said that the other day, right? That when you do the Trumas HaDeshen, after the Trumas HaDeshen, when you would take out the Deshen, so then we said you would wear kind of worn out clothing, right? V'nicham sham, when the pasuk says that he then takes the ashes, v'nicham sham, and he leaves them there. No, this is not the ashes. It's talking about the begadim of the Kohen Gadol, right? That he takes off the begadim that he wore into the Kodesh Kodashim, v'nicham sham, and he leaves them there. That teaches that they have to be buried. Now, according to Reb Dosa, who says that a Kohen Hedget can wear them the rest of the days of the year. So Reb Dosa omer ru'uyin the Kohen Hedget. Reb Dosa says that a Kohen Hedget is actually allowed to use them, so that means that you obviously then don't have to bury them. So what does he learn out from v'nicham sham shleishtamish ben Yom Kippurim acher, that this Kohen Gadol shouldn't use these same clothing for another Yom Kippur? He uses them once, and then he puts them aside, and the Kohen Hedget can use them. That is what Reb Dosa learns regarding the begadim of the Kohen Gadol. So now the tie into our Gemara. So the Gemara wants to say that the machlokas here is what? So let's say that Rabbi Yehuda, who says that in addition to wearing the michnasayim and the ksones, he also wears the mitznefes and the avneit. Why does he have to wear all 4 begadim? Because he says that he holds that Trumas HaDeshen is an avoda, is a proper avoda, and therefore you need the 4 begadim. And according to Reb Dosa, who doesn't learn out from Yilbash that you need the michnasayim, that you need the mitznefes and the avneit, so he's going to learn that it is not an avoda, and therefore you don't need the mitznefes and the avneit because it's not an avoda like Rish Lakish. So we'll say that Rabbi Yochanan is like Rabbi Yehuda, that it's an avoda, it's a proper avoda, and Reb Dosa that Rish Lakish is like Reb Dosa, that it's not necessarily an avoda, and therefore he doesn't learn out from Yilbash mitznefes ve'avneit. Lo, the Gemara says no. D'chuli alma avoda. Both Reb Dosa and Reb Yehuda hold that Trumas HaDeshen is a proper avoda. So why doesn't Reb Dosa say anything then about the mitznefes and the avneit? This is the machlokas between Reb Yehuda and Reb Dosa. Well, the machlokas is that according to Reb Yehuda, we needed the pasuk to teach us that if the pasuk wouldn't have had the word Yilbash, I would have thought that you wouldn't have to wear mitznefes va'avneit. So therefore the pasuk says Yilbash to teach that Yitaga do have to wear mitznefes va'avneit because it's an avoda. According to Reb Dosa, he says I don't need the pasuk to teach me that he wears the mitznefes va'avneit. Obviously he wears the mitznefes va'avneit because the Trumas HaDeshen is an avoda. From the fact that he wears the michnasayim and he wears the ksonis, it's a proper avoda. I don't need the pasuk to teach me that he wears mitznefes va'avneit. Obviously, he wears mitznefes va'avneit. And as we learned out from michnasayim, right? We learned out that it has to be al basari yesterday. That nothing comes first, and from the midobad, it has to be the right measure. So that's what we learn out specific things from the Michnasayim and from the Ksones, but the Mitznefes and the Avnet, that we don't have specific things that we have to learn out from them, so we just leave them out. And obviously, according to Reb Dosa, he says that we're going to have to, Reb Dosa says that obviously we're going to have to, he's going to have to wear the Mitznefes and the Avnet. It goes without saying, because in fact it's an avoda, so it's not necessarily a split between whether or not you say it's an avoda. Okay, fine. Very, very, very nice. Bye, Rabavin. Rabavin asks a kasha. Chumas hadeshen bechama. What is the shiur? What is the amount? How much of these ashes do you taka take? Right? We said that the kohen goes onto the mizbeach, takes a shovel, takes a shtickle ashes. How much? Chumas meiser yafinula. Do you learn it out from chumas meiser? What's chumas meiser? We all know this. We all know what chumas meiser is. Chumas meiser is that, of course, you have your field. You take 10%, you give it to the Levi. Obviously, you give Truma to the Kohen, but then you take 10%, you give it to the Levi. And then the Levi takes 10% of that and he gives it to the Kohen. So, at the end of the day, what Trumas Meiser is, it's 100th of the field, right? You take 10%, give it to the Levi takes 10% of that, which is, 100, and he gives that to the Kohen. So do we say, so when, so it says, Varimosim imenu, Truma Hashem Meiser min Meiser. So do we say that just like Trumas Meiser is 100, so therefore Trumas Hadeshin is 100? Oh, Mitrumas Midyon Yafin, or maybe we learn it out from the Truma that of the spoils of Midyon, which was 1/500. So which one is it? Tashma Kaminir the Tani Rebchia, the Rebchia taught Nemerkan Veherim v'Nemer Lahalan Veherim. It says Rebchia, actually it says Veherim in the context of Menochis. Malahalan bekumtso, Afkan bekumtso. So it says Rebchia that actually by Menochis, by Korban Mincha, it's a fistful, it's a kometz. So therefore, let's say that by the Trumas Hadeshen, it's going to be a fistful. Now, you're not actually going to take a fistful of Truma of the ash, because the ashes are hot coals, or they can be hot coals. So you'll use a shovel, but make sure you have at least a fistful's worth. All right, we have a guest here. 1 second, let's see. Come in. Ah, it's Brielle. Oh, okay. Hey, all righty. All right. Well, Brielle, we're on the air, so you got to think quick. You got to keep the people entertained.
If you could help me attach the AirPods to my phone.
Oh, what do you think the answer is?
Yes, because you're probably not busy.
Very nice. Breeze.
After Babylon Talmud?
Right.
Alright.
I'll see ya. Wait, Breeze, can you close the door, please? Sure. See ya. Ay. Alright, let's go weiter. Alright, fine. Where were we again? Tashma Tanu Rebchia never come be'er v'nemer lalim be'er matam lom bekumtso. No, where am I? Okay, fine. Afkan bekumtso. Omer Rab. No, Rav hat gesagt. Said Rab. Arba avodas zar chayev alein misa. There are 4 avodas. There are 4 things that there are 4 things in the Beis Hamikdash that if a non-kohen does them, well, sorry, fella, we're gonna kill him. Zrika v'aktara v'nisuch hamayim v'nisuch hayayin. The 4 are zrika. If a fellow throws like blood onto the mizbeach, v'aktara, if he throws something onto the fire of the mizbeach, right? If he burns something on the mizbeach, v'nisuch hamayim, pouring of the water onto the mizbeach, on sukkahs, which we are going to learn about in, of course, Masechta Sukkah in the 5th paragdar, in v'nisuch hayayin, as well as the wine libations. If you pour wine into the mizbeach, then you're chayav misa in all of those cases. V'levi Omar, Levi adds, af Trumas Hadeshen. Additionally, if a non-kohen does Trumas Hadeshen, so we will terminate him. V'tani v'chein tani Levi b'masnise, and similarly Levi taught in his brisa or something. this is extremely interesting to me. I don't know what it is. I also didn't really look it up much, but only sort of rudimentarily. What's b'masnise? What's his brisa? Oh, wait a second. Reb Chia and Reb Oshia are the ones. Reb Chia and Reb Oshia or Reb Hoshaya, are they the same people? Maybe Reb Oshia. Reb Chia and Reb Oshia Taka, they were the editors of the Tosefta, I think. Boom. Yeah. There you go. So maybe that's what it means. That kilu Reb Chia taught in the Tosefta. Boom. No, but this isn't Reb Chia. This is Levi. So what was the brises of Levi? Did he have his own brises? Is it possible that maybe we learned about it at the end of Masechta Shabbos? All right, this isn't the right time for me to think out loud over here. Or maybe it is. Let's go weiter. So similarly, Levi taught in his brisa of Trumas Hadeshen. Also, Trumas Hadeshen, a non-kohen would be chayiv misa if he does it. My taima the Rav. How come Rav says that it's these four avodas? The pasuk says, "Va'atu v'necha itcha," you and your children with you, referring to Aaron HaKohen. Tishma es kunaschem, you shall guard your kihuna. L'chol dvar mizbeach, for everything related to the mizbeach, l'mibeis laparoches, as well as for the things in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Vavadtem, and you will do the avodas matana etin es kunaschem v'azar karvumas. I will give your service, a service of giving. Vazar Karavumas, and any non-kohen who gets too close will be terminated. Avodas matanav la'avodas siluk. You hear that? So Rav says, well, it says avodas matana, a service of giving, not a service of removing. Trumas Hadeshen, of course, is removing ash from the mizbeach. We are talking about putting things like zrikas adam, haktara, nisuch hamayim, nisuch hayayin, things that you're putting. Vavadtem, and when it says that you will do a service, so va'avadatem is like avoda tama, complete. Avoda tama v'avoda sheish acharei avoda. It has to be a complete service, a completion of a service, not a step in a completion of a service. And therefore, zrikas adam is the final step of like shchita, right? You do shchita, kabbalah sadam, malachas sadam. It completes with zrikas adam, throwing it on the mizbeach. Of course, burning something on the mizbeach. That's kind of like the last step there, right? Nisuch hamayim, nisuch hayayin. These are all the final things that you're going to be doing. The Levi, how come Levi includes Trumas Hadeshen? Rabbi Rachman l'chol dvar mizbeach. When the pasuk says, right, that same pasuk says l'chol dvar mizbeach, all of the things of the mizbeach. So it includes also, that comes to include even Trumas Hadeshen. According to Rav, he says that the ulichol dvar mizbeach comes to include when you have a par helim davar shel tzibor and a par kohen mashiach, right? These are special types of korban chatases that their blood is sprinkled inside the heichal, as well as the blood that's thrown in between the aron hakodesh, the aron on Yom Kippur by the kohen gadol, as well as the oil of a mitzora, that these are things that are sprinkled inside the heichal, or in the case of the kohen gadol, inside the kodesh kodashim. So if a zar does any of these things, he needs to be terminated. V'levi nafkale midvar lichol dvar. So how does Levi know that these additional avodas, these sprinklings of the blood inside, also, if a zar does them, he needs to be terminated? So he learns out from, it could have said kol dvar, but it said lichol dvar to include even these additional things. V'Rav dvar lichol dvar lo darish, whereas Rav doesn't have the tradition, at least, of learning that from, it could have said dvar, but it says lichol dvar to include those additional things, and therefore he just learns it out from, it doesn't learn out from the extra lamed, he just learns it out from the fact that it says l'chol dvar. That's how we learn out these additional sprinkles from inside. Levi learns out from the extra lamed, that's how he learns out these additional sprinklings that are inside. And just from the general kol dvar, he learns out even Truma Hadeshen. Very, very nice. So that, in a nutshell, is the machlokas between Rav and Levi. Rav says that the avodas that a zar is chayv misa for are zrika sadam, haktara, nisuch hamayim, nisuch hayayin, and then we also additionally learned out these par davar shel tzibur, par kohen Mashiach, the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur, and the mitzora. Fine. The really nafkamina is really when it comes to Trumas Hadeshen. Levi says that a zar who does Trumas Hadeshen will additionally be chayiv misa. Now, the Gemara asks a kasha on Levi. The kasha is based on the concept of klal ufrat. It is not a difficult concept. We've seen it a few times before. What is the concept of klal ufrat? The concept is this. When you have a general rule followed by a specific rule, then everything is simply limited to that specific rule. That if you have a general rule and then it is followed by a specific rule, forget about the general rule. It is entirely limited into that specific rule. So now, frag the Gemara, so let's say, sure, Levi, granted that when the pasuk says l'chol dvarim mizbeach, it's inclusive, and you want to say from there that it includes even the Trumas Hadeshen. But avodas matana prat. But then when it says after that, avodas matana, that it is a service of giving, of placing, that should limit all of the services to services of giving, not services of removing. So Levi, why don't we say klal ufrat, that even though you have that beautiful riboy, but it's followed by a prat, so it should all be limited to just avodas matanas, things that are placing, not things that are removing. Good kasha, right? Of course. So klal ufrat, when you have a klal followed by a prat, ein b'chlal elamasha b'prat. So all that's included is just whatever the specific detail is limited to. Avodas matana in avodas siluk lo. Let's say that Yechaya Azar is chai for avodas matana, not for avodas siluk, not for Trumas Hadeshen. Or Makra answers Levi, well, lemaise, the pasuk says that if you look at the pasuk, sure, it says avodas matana. Sure, it says l'chol dvar mizbeach, and then later on it says avodas matana, but they're not immediately directly juxtaposed. In between there, it says ulmibeis la paroches v'avadtem. So Levi says, look, it's not a direct klal ufrat. It's broken up. It's broken up by the words ulmibeis la paroches in the kodesh hakodashim v'avadtem, and you will do the avod. And therefore, he says that what we learn out from there. So he says, forget about the klal ufrat. It's broken up. It's interrupted. And instead, ulmibeis la paroches v'avadtem, what we learn out is that it says in the kodesh hakodashim, and you will do the service ulmibeis la paroches. Hu tavodas matana velo avodas siluk, right? Meaning it says when we base la brochos va'avaditem avodas matana etenes kunaschem vazar kariv yumas. That it says we base la parochos va'avaditem, that it's talking about the avoda in the kodesh hakodashim, and then it says avoda immediately after that avodas matana. So what Levi wants to argue is that this concept of avodas matana, of specifically needing to be a placing and not a removing, is only the service in the kodesh hakodashim. We're only doing, right, if a zar does a service that he is placing, it'll be chayiv misa, but if he does one that he's removing, he wouldn't necessarily be chayiv misa, at least not for that. So therefore, umibeis la paroches hu avodas matana, that when we say a service of placing, that is specifically in the kodesh hakodashim, v'lo avodas siluk, but not a service of removing. Habachutz, but when it comes to outside of the heichel, afil avodas siluk, then it would be even avodas siluk, even removing, such as the Trumas Hadeshen. That's what Levi wants to argue. If that's the case, Levi, v'avaditem nami. But fact the Gemara, what do we learn out from avaditem? Avoda tama, that it needs to be a complete avoda. It has to be something that is the conclusion of the steps, such as zrika, haktara, nisuch. But fact the Gemara, avaditem is juxtaposed directly to ulmibeis la paroches, right? It literally says ulmibeis la paroches v'avaditem. So are we going to say Nami elmi beis la paroches hu da avoda tama v'lo avoda sheish achrei avoda. So when we say that it has to be the completion of avoda, is that specifically only in the kodesh hakodashim? Habachutz, but if it's outside the heichal, afilu avoda sheish achrei avoda, then even avodas that have other steps after them, Levi, would you say that you'd be chayev, that a zar would be chayev for those outside of the heichal because v'avadatem is limited only to the kodesh kodashim? And notice that I'm saying outside of the heichal and the kodesh kodashim. What about inside the heichal? We'll get there in a second. So the Gemara answers va'avadatem hadar arbe kra. That the vav in va'avadatem, says Levi, is coming to include even outside. To say that va'avadatem, when it says it has to be a complete avoda, it's not limited to the kodesh kodashim. It's even zrika sadam on the mizbeach hachitzon, for example. Well, yeah, obviously, but it would exclude anything that isn't. So let's say shchita or holacha. It has to be a completion of the avoda. Fine. Now, frekt Rava, avoda siluk beheichal mahu. So now, what about in the heichal? We've been talking about mibeis la paroches, which is the kodesh kodashim. We've been also talking about outside of the heichal, such as like on the mizbeach hachitzon. But what about in the heichal? If you do according to Levi, who says that avodas matana is limited to the kodesh kodashim. What if you do an avodas siluk? Let's say, I don't know, removing bread from the shulchan or something. You do avodas siluk in the heichal. Do we say that avodas matana v'lo avodas siluk is only in the kodesh kodashim, or maybe it's also in the heichal? So lifnim midamin lei, do we compare it to the kodesh kodashim, or lachutz midamin lei, or do we compare it to outside? In which case, according to Levi, avodas siluk would be chayiv, right? Meaning Levi says that you'd be chayiv for trumas hadeshen, which is outside the heichal and mizbeach hachitzon. But he also says that you'd be patur for avodas siluk in the kodesh kodashim, because it's only avodas matana, it's the exclusion of avodas siluk. What about in the heichal? So the pashta, so Rava answers mi beis ula mi beis. It could have said mi beis, but it says ula mi beis to include also the heichal, to compare it to the kodesh kodashim. And it's meaning, it doesn't say just mi beis la parochas, which is the kodesh kodashim. It says ula mi beis to include that it's not just the kodesh kodashim, it's also the heichal, that avodas matana v'lo avodas siluk is by the heichal as well. Fine. Frakti Gemara. Frakti Gemara. If we're saying that an avoda tama you're chayiv for, a complete avoda you're chayiv for, so let me ask you a kasha. If you have a zar who put the bread into the shulchan, should he be chayiv for that? Sikasidu bazichin. So the Gemara says, well, that's not exactly the last stage, a final stage of avoda. Because after putting the bread into the shulchan, you also have to put the what were those called? The bazichin. I don't know, we can call them spoons. I feel like there was another word for them, but let's call them spoons. You got like these like spoons that you put on top full of ketores, of frankincense, levona. So see the bazichin l'chayiv. Okay, fine. Seder. So what if he puts these spoons of frankincense on top of the shulchan? Maybe he'll be chayiv for that. Ikasiluk ve'aktara. Says, yeah, but that's not the final step either. The final step is then the following Shabbos, when they remove the spoonfuls of frankincense and burn them on the mizbeach. That is the final avoda, and burning, of course, we know that you'll be chayiv for. Zar shesider samanor l'chayiv. Okay, but what about if a non-kohein sets up the menorah? Maybe you should be chayiv for that. Ika nisinas psila. So the Gemara says, yeah, but after setting up the candles, there's also the you have to put the wick in there. No, some psila l'chayiv. Okay, fine. So what about the person who puts the wick? Ika nisinas shemen. Well, you still have to put in the oil. Okay, fine. So no some shemen l'chayiv. So why don't we say that the fellow who puts the oil in the menorah will be chayiv? Ika adlaka. Well, you still have to light it. Hidlik l'chayiv. Okay, fine. So why don't we say that the fellow who lights it is chayiv? Hadlaka lav avodahi. So we say, yeah, but lighting isn't an avoda. and therefore he won't be chayiv for lighting. All right, for lighting the menorah. V'lo, but 1 second, lighting the menorah is not an avoda. V'atani, we learn in the Brisa, v'nosnu b'nei Aharon HaKohen eish al mizbeach, that the children of Aharon will put a fire on the mizbeach, v'archu eitzim ala eish, and then they will put wood on the fire. Limed ala tzosas ilyusa shelo tei ela b'koyin kosher v'chlei sharis, teaches that lighting the sort of initial twigs that's going to light the mizbeach, that has to be done by a kohen and who's wearing the big day kahuna. And therefore, so we see that lighting a fire is taka and avoda. So then maybe a zar, a non-kohen, who lit the menorah should be chayiv. So the Gemara answers, Atzosas ilyus avodai atzak alav avodai. Yeah, lighting, sparking the mizbeach is an avoda, and that must be done by a kohen wearing big day kahuna. However, lighting the menorah is not an avoda, and therefore, if a zar did it, he would not be chayiv misa. What if a non-kohen sets up the pyre of the mizbeach? Maybe he should be chayiv for that. Well, after that, you still have to put those two boards of wood on top of it. Fine. So sidur shnei gzirin chayiv. Well, what if you put those two strips of wood on top? Maybe you should be chayiv for that. Well, after that, you still have to put the limbs on the mizbeach. But 1 second, for Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Yochanan, Zeh shesider shnei gzir eitzim chayiv. But 1 second, Rav Asi says the name of Rav Yochanan that the fellow who sets up the two boards of wood will taka be chayiv. So on the one hand, we have Rav who says that you would be potter, that a zar would not be chayiv for putting those two strips of wood on the mizbeach because they're still the nesina sevarim. Yet Rabbi Yochanan seems to be saying that actually if you put the two strips of wood on the mizbeach, you'll be chayiv. So pligi, this is machlokas between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, Masava avodatamayi, Masava lavodatamayi, that Rabbi Yochanan considers the shnei gzirei eitzim to be a complete avoda. Rav does not consider it to be a complete avoda because you still have to put the limbs on the mizbeach, and therefore you would be zar would be potter. Tana kavasi de Rav, Tana kavasi de Levi. We have a brisa supporting Rav who does not include Trumas Hadeshen, and we have a brisa supporting Levi who includes Trumas Hadeshen in the things that a zar would be chayiv misa for. Tana kavasi de Rav. We have a brisa supporting Rav. Avodos shezar chayiv aleim. What are the services that a zar, a non-kohen, would be chayiv misa for? Chayiv aleim misa. Zrika sadam, doing the zrika, ben lifnim, ben lifnai v'lifnim, whether it's in the heichal, whether it's in the kodesh kodashim, v'amazeh bechatos ha'of, and somebody who sprinkles the blood of a sin bird offering, v'amaktir ba'olas ha'of, somebody who squeezes the blood against the mizbeach, and somebody who burns in olas ha'of, v'amenasech shlosha lugin, mayim u'shlosha lugin yain, it's somebody who libates 3 logs of water or 3 logs of wine. So we see in this brisa zrika, haktara, and the 2 types of nisuch hamayim, nisuch hayayin, but no mention of Trumas Hadeshen. Tana kavasi de Levi, and we have a brisa supporting Levi. Avodah shezar chayiv alei misa. What are the services that a zar will be chayiv misa? Hameru mesadeshen, somebody who does Trumas Hadeshen, v'sheva azor shebifnim, as well as the sprinkling 7 times inside, right in the heichal or even in the kodesh kodashim, v'sheva mitzorah, and the sprinkling of the oil of the mitzorah inside the heichal. V'mayla gab mizbeach. Bein davar kosher, bein davar pasul, and somebody who puts onto the mizbeach, a zar who puts on the mizbeach, whether it's something kosher, whether it is something pasul, he'll be chayiv for that. I think, and therefore, so we see that this brisa mentions Trumas Hadeshen, so it's a support for Levi. I think that we will stop it here. Chavit, that was Daf Chaf Daled of Masechta Yoma. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's do a shtickle review. At the beginning, we continued with machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish about is Trumas Hadeshen considered an avoda or not. Reish Lakish says no. Rabbi Yochanan says yes. We had a machlokas about the word yilbash, that when the pasuk says it says in extra time yilbash. What do we learn from there? Rabbi Yehuda says that we learn out that the Trumas Hadeshen needs to be done in addition to the mechnasayim and the ketones. You also need to be wearing the mitznefes ve'avnet. That is what Rabbi Yehuda learns out from there. Reb Dosa learns out from Yilbash that the begadim that the Kohen Gadol wears into the Kodesh Kodashim on Yom Kippur can be worn by regular Kohanim the rest of the year. Rabbi argues and says no, what it teaches is that regular Kohanim are allowed to use just worn out clothing. That would be acceptable. We wanted to say that Rabbi Yehuda holds that because you need a mitznefes and an avnet because it's a regular avoda. Reb Dosa will say that you don't need mitznefes va'avnet because it's not a regular avoda. So therefore, Rish Lakish would say like Reb Dosa, and Reb Yochanan would say like Reb Yehuda. We say no, Reb Dosa and Reb Yehuda both agree that actually Trumas Hadeshin is an avoda, and Reb Dosa's opinion is that you actually don't need the pasuk to teach me that you need the kohen needs to wear the mitznefes va'avnet because it's obvious. We had an interesting shaila about what is the amount, what's the shear that you need for Trumas Hadeshin. We said it's a fistful, a kometz, because we compare it to a mincha. And then we got into machlokas between Rav and Levi regarding the activities that a non-kohen will be chayiv misa for if he does them, the services that it will be chayiv misa for if he does them. According to Rav, it is zrikas adam, haktara, burning things on the mizbeach, pouring the wine and the wine libations and the water libations. According to Levi, he includes as well Trumas Hadeshin. The conditions for Rav were that it needs to be an avoda tama, it has to be a complete avoda, as well as something that it's avodas matana, it's giving, not removing. Whereas Levi includes from l'chol avoda, he includes also Trumas Hadeshin. That's essentially the machlokas. We kind of went back and forth a little bit after that, but that was really sort of the core focus, I would say, of a lot of the daf today. Cheve, hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Peace out.